President, my amendment is about the next census, and it simply says that no funds in that appropriation bill can be spent on the next census unless we ask about citizenship. I believe that's a basic requirement for the next census to give us adequate tools to deal with the whole host of issues, including illegal immigration, including properly handling congressional reapportionment. And again, Mr. President, I find it very sad and quite frankly telling that the majority leader is going to such lengths to avoid having a vote on that simple concept, that simple idea. Why should we ask a question about citizenship? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, Mr. President, the census is supposed to give us in Congress important information, detailed information, the tools we need regarding how to handle a host of federal programs and federal issues. Now, certainly a major issue we need to deal with in this country and in this Congress is immigration, including illegal immigration. Seems like basic information we would want to collect: how many folks covered in the census are citizens and how many are non-citizens. That's basic information that would help us in a whole host of ways with regard to federal programs and with regard to dealing with the immigration issue. Mr. President, there's another, even more important, in my opinion, reason we should collect this information, and that's because one of the most important things any census is used for is reapportioning the U.S. House of Representatives, determining how many House seats each state in the Union gets in terms of representation. As it stands now, Mr. President, the plan is to do the census, to not distinguish in any way between citizens and non-citizens, and therefore to have non-citizens counted in congressional reapportionment. I think this is crazy and goes against the very idea of a representative democracy, people being elected by voters to represent citizens in the United States Congress. I don't think the Founding Fathers set up our democracy to have non-citizens represented in the United States Congress. So as it stands now, without asking that simple, basic, fundamental question, non-citizens will be counted in congressional reapportionment. That means states with a particularly large number of non-citizens, including illegal aliens, will be rewarded for that, will get more representation, more say, more clout in the U.S. House of Representatives. States who don't have that issue will be hurt. They'll get less say, less clout, less members of the U.S. House of Representatives. I think that is fundamentally wrong. I also have a very specific interest in fighting against that because Louisiana is one of 8 states that would specifically be hurt. There are at least 8 states who will have less representation in the U.S. House of Representatives if we count all people in congressional apportionment, including non-citizens, versus if we just count citizens. I think let me specifically address, Mr. President, some of the arguments that have been made against this amendment, because I think they're completely erroneous. One argument is that this will intimidate folks and discourage non-citizens from filling out the census form. I think it's important to note, number one, that this citizenship question is asked in the long form. And the long form gets millions of responses, and the census has never noted any difficulty in getting folks to fill out the long form. This question is also asked in the American Community Survey, which the Census Bureau does. Again, same citizenship question asked here. We get plenty of responses. The Census Bureau has never noted a big problem in terms of getting those responses. To make this perfectly clear, I am perfectly willing to revise my amendment so that we only focus on citizenship, not immigration status. And I'll be happy to revise my amendment so it only mentions and only focuses on citizenship versus immigration status. The other argument that the Census Bureau itself has apparently made is that this would be cumbersome and cost money at this stage in the census. And, Mr. President, quite frankly, I find this pretty ironic coming from a bureaucracy which is spending $13 billion on this new census, up from $4.5 billion from the last census. So here's a bureaucracy where the cost of the new census versus the last census has tripled. They've asked for, they're getting $13 billion, but asking this one question, which they already asked in the long form, which they already asked in the American Community Survey, is a huge problem and will cost too much money. That's simply silly on its face, Mr. President. It's important to do this right, and certainly asking a basic question like citizenship is central to doing it right. So, in summary, Mr. President, I'd urge all of my colleagues to demand a vote on this important issue and to vote against cloture on the bill until we get that vote. And then, Mr. President, when we get that vote, I'd urge all of my colleagues to support the Vitter Amendment number 2644. It is very simple and straightforward. It will say, ask the citizenship question. Let us know how many folks in the overall count are citizens and how many are non-citizens.